2 o'clock in the morning, it's just me and this woman, and we're walking along, and she's walking a few yards ahead of me, but she keeps giving me like the over-the-shoulder, like that, you know? And then she starts to pick up the pace. She starts to walk a lot faster. So I think, oh, she must hear the train coming. Or, you know, maybe she feels it in her feet, like a Native American. So I start to sprint down the hallway at her, and she looks back and she's like, ah! And then she gives chase, right? So now we're booking it down the corridor at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm gaining on her. And we're getting to the end of the hallway, and she starts to go into that, like, dead-end shuffle, you know, that women do when you chase them. And I'm almost at her, and then it dawns on me.
This is why you never go to the well on your own. In 1983, a young boy was camping with his family on Roan Mountain in North Carolina when his mom asked him to head on down the path and get some water from the well. When the boy didn't return, his mom went to check on him and he was gone. A massive search party was launched to find him, but with temperatures rapidly dropping and finding no trace of him, the family braced for the worst. Then, miraculously, on the 7th day of the search, the boy shows up on the mountaintop in an area they had already searched, healthy and clean. When they asked the boy, "Where have you been?" he said he had been at the well when a tall, faceless man showed up behind him, scooped him up, and brought him to the top of the mountain where he kept him in his cabin all week. After the boy gave a very detailed description of exactly where this cabin was on the mountain, the police were eager to go find it and confront this guy.
David.
She tries to switch all the lights back on, but they're not working anymore. And all of a sudden, she's finding it really hard to breathe. She's afraid she might faint, so she kneels down onto the floor. Then suddenly she feels sharp nails running down her back. And she tries to move, but she feels so weak that she can't. She turns around to see who it is, but before she can, she blacks out. The next thing she remembers is waking up in a hospital bed, and her mom is sitting next to her looking really worried. Her mom's like, "Everything's okay. There was a carbon monoxide leak in the apartment, and you passed out." The nurse is like, "In the next few weeks, you may feel tired or sluggish or have hallucinations. Don't worry, that's totally normal." And my friend is like, "What about the back scratches?" Her mom's like, "What are you talking about?" So she runs to the bathroom, pulls up her hospital gown, and there are 4 dark scratches on her back. When she comes back from the bathroom, her mom looks concerned, and she goes, "Honey, there's also something else you should know. Dave, who lived on the first floor, passed away, and they've been cleaning out his apartment, and they found something. And it might freak you out, but I feel like you should know about it."
Story time, Tinder edition. Okay, the story blew up on Twitter like a while ago, but I'm just gonna retell it because it's very informational. So there was this guy and this girl, and they met through Tinder, and then they met up and they went on this date. And they were out at dinner, and then she starts not feeling so well. And then she says, "I really need to go home." And he says, "Yeah, I'll drive you home." And she says, "Okay." So then they get to her house, and then she starts feeling better. So then she says, "Do you want to come in for some coffee?" And then he says, "Yeah, sure." So they go inside, they have their coffee, and then she doesn't feel well again. And she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't feel well again. I think you really need to leave." And he's like, "Okay." And he leaves. And then she goes to bed, and in the middle of the night, she wakes up and she hears this noise down in her kitchen. And so she locks her door and she calls the cop. And the 911 operator is just on the other line saying, "Can you just stay on the line until the cops get there?" And then the cops get there and they're like, "The door is locked. Like, we don't think anyone's inside." And she's like, "I promise you, someone's inside my house. I can hear them." She says, "You have my permission to break down the door." So she's still up in her room, and then she hears the cops break down the door. And then she hears some rustling and some fighting. Part 2 coming now.
A little girl made me cry last night. So the coffee shop that I work at also has ice cream. And so this lady had brought in her granddaughter to get ice cream. This little girl's probably about 4 or 5 years old. And she asked for ice cream with sprinkles. And so I absolutely loaded it with sprinkles because she's a kid and I have a heart. And the entire time this girl's eating her ice cream, she just keeps glancing at me. And right before they're about to leave, the grandmother brings her up and says, okay, tell her what you wanted to tell her. The little girl looks up at me and goes, I think you're a princess. And the grandmother goes, tell her why you think that. And the little girl looks up at me and goes, because you remind me of sunshine.
David.
So I was in the grocery store, minding my own business, as one should, and I kept getting stares, which I understand why, because look at all this. No, I'm kidding. It's apparently because my jean shorts are too short. It made me uncomfortable. But alas, I'm a strong gal, I just keep a-strolling. And I noticed that there's this older man who keeps a-walking behind me. And I'm thinking, what's good, Bubba? Well, he approaches me and he says this. Yes, this is true, buckle up. Ma'am, you're not wearing a whole lot of clothing. You're gonna make men stumble. And I said, sir, are you saying you're falling head over heels in love with me? He didn't think that was funny. He said, when girls like you wear clothing like that, it's very difficult for boys and men like me to control my thoughts and actions. I said, sir, if you and others can't control your thoughts and actions, you shouldn't be leaving the house because you're a predator.
Biatches, if you ever want to compliment someone but you just can't find something worth complimenting and you don't want to lie, all that you have to do is make a statement with excitement. One time, I had a teacher come in with very ugly shoes and all that I did was, oh my God, insert name here. Are those shoes new? And she went, yes, they are. Thank you. Do you see what I did there? It's a scam.
This is why parents should believe their kids. In 2010, a 15-year-old boy started to notice that the door to his attic, which was in his bedroom, was always open. One day, when his mom's giving him a hard time about being lazy, he's like, well, you're one to talk. You always leave my attic door open. She's like, I haven't touched your attic door in months, and nobody else has either. Not easily frightened, the boy decides to leave the attic door open. And so he's laying in bed, and he kind of looks over at the door, and standing in the door frame is a figure staring right at him. He bolts, tells his parents, they don't believe him, and then 6 months later they move anyway. A few years later, the boy discovers his favorite teacher actually moved into his old house. And so he jokingly asks her, you ever see any ghosts walking around your attic? Her face got completely serious, and she's like, you know, as soon as we moved in, the door to the attic kept opening. So we investigated and we found a trap door that led onto the roof. Someone had been crawling in through that entrance and living in the attic for years.
When I was like 5 years old, I almost got kidnapped. Story time. So back in the day, it used to be safe for kids to play out on the street, or so I thought. You know when you're a little kid, you really don't listen to your parents? Well, anyways, what happened was that my mom was cooking, and I was like, Mommy, please, 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 let me play outside with my new scooter. My mom was always very protective, so she would not let us out of her sight. She's like, I'm gonna go outside for 2 minutes with you, and then we're gonna come right back inside. I was like, yay! So I'm just over here playing outside, and my mom was like, se me queman las tortillas, se me queman las tortillas. For those who don't know, that means she was burning tortillas. She's like, sit on the steps here in the driveway. You know me being a dumb little child. I was like, let me see how fast I can go. Whee! Here I go with my scooter. I'm still in the driveway. This man and this woman are walking across the street. Then that creepy man was like, hey, come here. That woman was like, I just want to see your scooter. I dropped that scooter and I said, skirt. They started running after me up my driveway.
This true story is so simple and so creepy. On June 21st, 2009, a 16-year-old wakes up to an empty house around 11 a.m. He heads downstairs, grabs a snack, and goes to the basement and plans on watching TV for the next few hours until he meets his friend around 3. About 30 minutes later, his mom comes downstairs and asks him, where have you been all day? Confused, he says, I've only been up for like 30 minutes. And then he looks at his phone, and it's after 7 o'clock at night. There's dozens of missed calls and several text messages from his friend and his mom asking, where are you? He tells his mom that none of this makes any sense, but what she tells him is even worse. She said that she was there. This is why you should always trust your gut. In the 1970s, a young couple decided to go for a late-night hike in the woods. A couple minutes into their walk, and the man remembers thinking something's not right. He tells his girlfriend, but they just decide to ignore it and keep going, until he steps on something that felt really soft, like it was alive. Before he has a chance to see what he stepped on, they hear all this rustling in the bushes next to them, and they bolt. Years later, that couple turns on the TV, and a death row inmate who's about to be executed is being interviewed. And they ask him, was there ever a time that you were almost caught red-handed? He responded, yes, one time. I was in the woods, and a couple walked through, and the man actually stepped on the body of a girl I had just killed. I was hiding in the bushes just a few feet away. They didn't see me. That couple had run into one of the worst serial killers of all time, Ted Bundy.
Damn, David, it's official.